Okay. So, hi everyone, my name is Lyskawa, and this is a talk on Phi-feature resolution under coordination being grammar external. So, in a simple sentence like SpongeBob and Gary are swimming, we know that we don't say is swimming or am swimming, we generally agree. And what is commonly assumed is that there is a bunch of elements that give rise to the sentence that are fully grammar internal operations or relations. So these are coordination and Phi-features, agreement, and resolution. So here in this talk, I'm going to maintain that coordination, Phi-features, and agreement indeed are grammar internal. But what I'm going to question is the very element of resolution. So I'm going to claim that it is a grammar external or extra-grammatical operation or relation property, whatever you want to call it. So let me start with spelling out a working definition, a descriptive definition of what I mean by resolution. So I mean that by this computation of Phi-features like person number or grammatical gender or noun class of conjuncts in a coordinate structure that results in one set of Phi-features that is later exponed as some kind of agreement morpheme. And you see in this definition that we're dealing with these elements of coordinate structure, coordination, and Phi-features and agreement. And again, this is all in my assumptions going to continue to be grammar based, but I'm really going to pose a question about the nature of the computation involved in this. So on the right-hand side, we have a kind of toy diagram of linguistic derivation with all these elements of building structure, of agreement, and mapping of the competence onto performance. So really the question I'm going to be asking is, out of all these logical possibilities of where resolution could take place, where does it actually take place? Is it in the top part of this diagram, or is it in the bottom part of this diagram? And from the title of the talk, you know that it's actually, I'm going to claim that it's towards the bottom of the derivation of the diagram, but really in the kind of towards the end of the general derivation. So today I'm going to be using two lines of argumentation for this claim. The first one is a contrast between resolution of Phi-features under coordination and other phenomena that also require Phi-feature information reduction. For example, Omniverse agreement that I'm going to touch on today. And the second line of argumentation is non-Nonsystematicity of resolution in world languages. So the first line of argumentation contrasts with other phenomena. By other phenomena here, I mean just other phenomena where we're similarly to resolution, we're dealing with some kind of overabundance of features that need to be reduced. And examples of such phenomena could be omniverse agreement, could be person case constraint effects, perhaps also specificational copyright clauses, or even within coordination, we could contrast conjunction and disjunction. And in order for this contrast to make sense, we need to ensure that at least at some level of analysis, of abstraction, these phenomena share some kind of ingredient or key ingredient that allows us to predict that they should behave in the same way, at least at the level of an individual language. So today I'm going to be talking about omniverse agreement in Coccical, which is the type of agreement that doesn't care about position of an argument or its case marking or something, but really it cares about the Phi-features of the arguments. So it wants to agree with any argument in the clause, whichever is higher on some language-specific scale. In Coccical, it would be first or second person over third plural over third singular. And what is important is that you can morphologically expound the Phi-features of only one argument. So here we have an example of omniverse agreement, and we have a sentence, it was Lou who saw him. So we have a sentence where we're focusing the subject of a transitive clause. This subject is Mr. Lou. It's specified for third singular Phi-features, but also in this clause we have an object that is a pronoun, a third singular pronoun. And what we see in terms of agreement on the verb is a third singular morpheme. So the way we can analyze what's going on in this sentence is we can assume after Kuhn and Keine 2020 that the agreement probe involved in this sentence is feature gluttonous. So let's say it is located on an infill head. I mean, not let's say, this is actually what people argue for practical. So this agreement probe is located on the infill head that agreed both with a subject DP that is specified for third singular set of Phi features, but it also agreed with the object pronoun that is also third singular Phi features. And what it does is it copies all these values of Phi features onto the infill head and later performs some kind of reduction according to that scale that I just talked about, and ends up with a third singular set of Phi features. So what crucially we never see is, for example, a third plural morpheme in this construction. All right, so you might already know where I'm going with this one. Let's take a look at the behavior of resolution or coordination in the same language in practical. So we have a sentence like Mr. Lolmay and Mr. Liu played well. We are not dealing with Omniverse agreement anymore. This is a intransitive sentence that in this in here has a coordination, Mr. Lolmay and Mr. Liu. And what we see in terms of agreement is a third plural morpheme on the verb. So I'm going to assume that in this case also there is infill head that is multi-valued with Phi features of both of the conjuncts or all of the conjuncts that are involved. And this is maybe trivial for some of you that this is a possibility, given that we're in the workshop on multi-valuation, but this is also not something that comes all that easy to adopt for some approaches to agreement. So I'm going to justify my assumption a little bit more. And specifically, I'm going to justify it by proposing that there is no coordination phrase layer at all. And therefore, if resolution was to happen in the grammar, it would really need to take place on the infill head, because there's simply no other place where it could take place in the grammar. So there's no coordination phrase layer. And this view is particularly straightforward to model if one was to assume the approach to coordination called parallel structures by Goodall 87. And it's a type of approach to coordination that posits that conjuncts in a coordination are underlyingly clausal, so bigger than they are on the surface. And here's, I'm going to provide some evidence, novel empirical evidence for this, and I would like to hear your feedback on this. This is going to be evidence from lexeme selection. So Merchant 2019 has a nice list of lexical items in English that require a particular prepositions that are semantically null. So we can say that they involve the lexeme select for particular prepositions. So for example, in the sentence, I pride myself, you have to say on this soup, you cannot say in this soup. But in a related frame, I take pride, you have to say in this soup and not on this soup. And what we observe is that the same kind of restrictions on the type of preposition, on the selection of preposition hold under coordination. So if you coordinate prepositional phrases under I pride myself, you have to say on this soup and on this cake. You cannot say I pride myself in this soup and in this cake, or any kind of mix and match situation. And in contrast, if you say I take pride, you have to say in this soup and in this cake. You cannot say something, for example, like I take pride in this soup and on this cake. So you might wonder, well, maybe there's kind of like a strict restriction on matching of the prepositions between the two conjuncts, but we also see that this is not necessary. So when we look at lexeme selection that allows some kind of optionality, we see that we can have a mismatch of these prepositions under coordination. So the noun, a noun like concern can select for either preposition for or preposition about, but not other prepositions. So it's not like it's completely free to select for any preposition. So you have to say my concern for grammar, or you can say my concern about grammar. And what we see is that these can also mismatch under coordination. So you can also say my concern for grammar and about typos. So what this data shows is that there is some kind of relation between the selecting, in this case, noun, as well as both of the conjuncts. So this really shows that underlyingly the size of the conjunction is bigger than what we have on the surface. And I am going to use this evidence as evidence for coordination being underlyingly causal, and this kind of a view is particularly popular when one looks at the kind of traditional approach to coordination that involves conjunction reduction, but also we know that there's a lot of problems with this approach. And I'm not going to adopt this approach, but instead I'm going to adopt its cousin, its alternative called parallel structures, proposed by Goodall back in the 80s, in '87. And it's essentially a version of causal conjunction that involves multi-evaluation. So let me walk you through a sample derivation of a sentence with coordination, how it gives rise in under the approach of parallel structures. So we want to derive a sentence like Pat and Matt fix everything, where we're going to start with is building two separate sentences, like Pat fix everything. Don't worry about agreement yet. We're just building a structure first, and then second sentence, Matt fix everything. So we'll building two separate sentences, and the first sentence has its own infill head with agreement probe. It finds its own goal, Pat, and the second sentence has its own infill head, again with an agreement probe that finds its own goal, Matt. And what we're going to do next is perform a union of these sentences, which basically means just slapping these two sentences together and fusing identical nodes, which in this diagram is represented by double edges, while the non-identical nodes are going to continue to exist in parallel planes, at least until linearization. So essentially what we're getting is a fusion of the infill head that had these agreement probes that established two separate relations with two separate goals. And zooming on this infill head, we're going to have a single infill head with double linking to two separate goals, which then can translate to two set of Phi-features, third singular and third singular. So what we see with this view is that if resolution was to be grammar internal, it would really have to take place here on this infill head, and not, for example, on a coordination phrase, as some approaches to coordination often assume. And this allows us to really juxtapose the two phenomena that we just talked about. So what we have seen is that the output of Phi-feature reduction in Omniverse agreement is different than the output of Phi-feature resolution under coordination within the same language, here the language being Cochrane. So even though we looked at the two sets of third singular Phi-features, and I argued for the location of the agreement probe being the same in both of these scenarios, we really see that the output was different. So it was third singular in Omniverse agreement, but third plural in coordination. And what we could do with this data is propose just construction-specific rules for a Phi-feature reduction that is different between Omniverse agreement and resolution. Or we could not be happy with this approach, and instead we could look for a different locus of this Phi-feature reduction, at least for one of these constructions. And today I'm proposing, as you know, that it's the resolution or coordination that takes place in a completely different module, in a grammar external module or system. And to make this claim stronger, I'm gonna provide now a second line of argumentation, namely a non-systematicity of resolution behavior, which we would not expect if we were dealing with this kind of vanilla grammatical operation. So it's not particularly novel when I say that resolution is not as systematic as it is sometimes taken to be in many world languages. So English, German, French, Dutch, Russian, Polish, Bosnian, Serbian, Croatian, Greek, Xhosa, Chichewa, and possibly many more languages. So these are the languages that are already listed in the literature as as exhibiting non-systematic behavior of coordination, but I'm pretty certain that there's many more. So if you know of some more literature on this, or perhaps if you know of some languages that have not been reported yet, I'd love to hear from you. So Corbett, who works on actually like modeling the tendencies of resolution and has like beautiful, very extensive work on this. Corbett himself notes that, for example, person resolution is not quite as simple as descriptive grammars often imply. And what we see instead is examples of inter and intra-speaker variability and ineffability. And this happens for all kind of Phi-features. So it happens for person, number, as well as noun classes and grammatical gender. So we cannot say that only one type of Phi-features is somehow special and everything else is more systematic. This happens, this non-systematicity is attested for all types of Phi-features. And I'm going to walk you through this notion of this behavior, this non-systematic behavior using Polish, using both data that has been reported in the literature for a while, as well as something slightly more novel. So let us start with a traditional rule for grammatical gender resolution that states that whenever you're conjoining masculine human feature or virile, so it's a traditional Slavic term for a plural equivalent of masculine human. If you have these Phi-features, then you need to resolve to virile, but elsewhere, so if you don't have any of these features, you resolve to non-virile. And we immediately see an example of an exception to this rule. So Zhenyukova back in the late 70s reported the following example. A mother and a newborn baby were looking at each other. So we have a conjunct that carries a feminine feature, and we have a conjunct that carries a neuter feature. And according to the traditional rule, because we don't have any of the masculine human or virile features, we have to use the elsewhere part of the rule. So we should be resolving to non-virile. Indeed, this is what speakers produce and accept, but it's not the only variant. So speakers also produce and accept a virile variant. So this is something that is not predicted by this traditional rule of resolution. So what can we do with this? We could ignore this example, as has been done for a long time, or we can try to change something about the approach to resolution and maybe do some revisions. So this is what Przemowska has recently done. Well, a number of people have done it, but I think Przemowska is one of the best approach, or one of the best proposals. And I'm still going to show you that there are some undesired consequences of this proposal, and it's not really fully satisfying. So Przemowska says that we need to actually revise the Phi-feature system as well as the resolution rules. So what we're going to need is a second subsystem of Phi-features that is operative within resolution under coordination. That's going to be a system that is present on top of the kind of Phi-feature system that is operative outside of coordination. So we're immediately sacrificing some kind of parsimony of the grammar, at least for Polish. And we're going to propose that this new subsystem is kind of a mix of syntactic and semantic features. So on the right-hand side of this slide, we have a kind of lookup table where the headers or headings, whatever the label, the word is, the term is, represent the different Phi-features in the subsystem for resolution. So these are the headings for rows and columns. At their intersection, we see what the new resolution rule predict the agreement to be. And what you see is that while in some cells we have a single option for agreement, sometimes you have more than just viral or more than just non-viral. Sometimes you have two options. So what this system also, this new proposal also introduces is this new kind of notion of eligibility instead of deterministic function that we kind of maybe are more used to from the traditional rules of resolution. And you can ignore the empty cells. This is not in any way meaningful. This is just how I constructed the table so that we don't repeat the combination of Phi features just in different order. It doesn't really, it shouldn't matter in this system. Okay, so this is kind of like a 3 bullet point of list of things that are non-ideal about the system, but maybe natural system is like non-optimal. But let's see now whether it accounts for all the data. And immediately we see that it does not. So we see back in that literature from Lyskawa from 79, we see a sentence that is listed as a second exception to the traditional rule of gender resolution in Polish that also the new revised proposal also does not account for. So we have a sentence, a sister-in-law and a cake were already on their way. So we have a sentence, a conjunct sister-in-law, which in the new system is interpretable feminine. And we have a conjunct cake, which in the new system is specified for uninterpretable non-human feature. And at their intersection, the rule tells us to resolve it to non-viral agreement. And indeed, this is what speakers produce and accept. But again, this is not the only variant. Speakers produce and accept a viral variant as well. And this is, again, this is not something that traditional nor the revised new, more powerful proposal predicts to be the case. And to add to this, let me add one more example of a different guise of this non-systematicity of resolution, namely ineffability. So here we have a sentence, a wizard and 5 witches flew to the castle. And what speakers report, at least some of the speakers, is that none of the agreement variants is fully acceptable. So the third singular neuter is completely out, non-viral is completely out. Viral, maybe if you squint right, could be somewhat produced, but or accepted, but it's still not this kind of most acceptable way of forming this sentence. And again, this is not something that the old or the new proposal predicts to be the case. So let me summarize this line of argumentation of what I would like us to take away from this. So I showed you that there are many exceptions to simple rules of resolution under coordination that maybe it's time we start explaining. And people have done it. And we looked at one new proposal or an alternative that still maintains that resolution is grammar internal. And what it needs to do is propose an addition of kind of non-trivial tools, for example, eligibility, the notion of eligibility. But what I have shown you is that this particular proposal still does not account for all the data. So maybe, when proposing these new tools, we have to kind of be honest with like how this all powerful addition deal with like other data. So again, if resolution was grammar external, this would actually explain not only the need for the use of non-traditional tools to account for a bulk of the data, but also it would still allow us to have this non-systematic behavior just because it's something that is grammar external. So going back to the main claim that you already know what it is, I propose that Phi-feature resolution under coordination is grammar external and perhaps is something like a matter of convention. So the advantages of this proposal in my view, is that we would remove the high-tech tools as well as stipulations from the grammatical toolkit. And also we could kind of open up an avenue for exploring the nature or the power of convention in the language use or language in general, and how the convention interacts with grammar. And to summarize quickly, because I see I'm running out of time, is that I first laid the ground for the analysis of coordination as involving multi-valuation, and this ground allowed us to contrast the output of Phi-feature reduction in Omniverse agreement with the output of resolution under coordination. That was my second line of argumentation for resolution being grammar external. And as a second line of argumentation, I showed that there is rampant non-systematicity of resolution behavior. And to end with a diagram, I put all these different elements that I talked about back onto the diagram of a linguistic derivation. So I kind of put it all together, what I said about coordination, what I said about agreement, as well as the resolution. And I would love your feedback about this. I'd love your comments and questions, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.